Good morning and welcome to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. It is now time to announce the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel. The Prize in Economic Sciences was established in 1968 by the Bank of Sweden, Sveriges Riksbank, and it is awarded by our Academy for work of eminent significance in the field of economic sciences. I'm Göran Hansson, I'm the Secretary General of the Academy, and with me today is, on my right, Professor Peter Fredriksson, who is the Chairman of the Prize Committee for Economic Sciences, and on my left, Professor Tommy Andersson, who is a member of the committee and an expert in the field of this year's prize. And before we announce the prize, I would like to thank you all for complying with the corona restrictions. Now, over to the prize. This year's prize is about auctions. Första, andra, tredje. Årets pris handlar om auktioner. Kungliga Vetenskapsakademin har beslutat att utdela Sveriges Riksbanks pris i ekonomisk vetenskap till Alfred Nobels minne, gemensamt till Paul R. Milgram och Robert B. Wilson för förbättringar av auktionsteorin och uppfinningar av nya auktionsformat. For improvements to the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences has today decided to award the Sveriges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel jointly to Paul R. Milgram and Robert B. Wilson for improvements to auction theory and invention of new auction formats. And you have the pictures of the laureates on the screen. Paul Milgram was born in Detroit, Michigan in the United States. He received his PhD from Stanford University in California, and he remains at Stanford nowadays as Professor of Humanities and Sciences. Robert Wilson was born in the town of Geneva in Nebraska in the United States. He got his PhD from Harvard University in Massachusetts, and he's currently Professor Emeritus of Management, also at Stanford University in California. And as you may know, the pandemic put some constraints also on the Nobel Prize celebrations. We are therefore not requesting that the laureates come to Stockholm in December to pick up their prizes. Instead, we plan for digital prize lectures and a digital prize ceremony, with laureates participating over video links. We will come back to you with details as soon as possible, but it's already clear that Drs. Milgram and Wilson will receive their awards before the end of the year, and that they will be invited to Stockholm next time we can celebrate Nobel Week with its traditional festivities. And now I'd like to hand over to the chairman of the prize committee, Peter Fredriksson, to make some remarks about this year's prize. Peter.
Thank you, Göran. It's an honor for me to introduce this prize. Auctions are tremendously important. Every day they allocate astronomical values between buyers and sellers. They affect all of us, perhaps more than we think. For example, it's likely that you bought your home in an auction. Moreover, the amount on your electricity bill is influenced by daily electricity auctions. Since auctions are so important, designing them in the right way is absolutely key. The work of Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson has allowed us to construct better auctions. They've applied auction theory to more realistic settings. Their basic research allowed them to invent entirely new auction formats. These new formats have been used in complex settings to the benefit of societies around the world. Professor Tommy Andersson will now describe their contributions in greater detail.
Tommy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Göran, and thank you, Peter. Auctions are everywhere. People use auctions to buy and sell different items on popular internet auction sites. electricity markets are organized as auctions. Financial assets, CO2 emission allowances, and radio spectrum are sold at auctions. But different auctions have different objectives. Some sellers may want to maximize revenue. Other sellers use auctions as a tool to achieve other objectives. For example, to increase bank liquidity, to reduce emission, or to maximize some kind of public value. The auction theory provided by Paul Milgrom and Robert Wilson is key for understanding how these objectives can be reached. In the 1960s, Robert Wilson started to investigate auctions with a common value, that is, a value which is unknown beforehand, but in the end is the same to all bidders. Consider an auction for fishing rights, where different bidders compete for fishing quotas. The value of the fishing quota is not only determined by the volume, but also by the price for fish. But this price is unknown at the time when the bidders place their bids. So they must estimate the common value of the auction, and the most optimistic bidder may therefore overestimate the value and overpay for the object. This is something known as the winner's curse. Robert Wilson's research helps to explain how rational bidders in common value auctions should place their bid to, on the one hand, maximize their own expected value of the auction while avoiding being struck by the winner's curse. Look at this painting. It's a beautiful painting, but it's also a bit scary, right? I'm sure that if you would buy this painting, you would think about the future resale value, that is, the common value of the auction. But I'm also sure that before you resale it, you will put it on your wall and you would admire it every day. That is your private value of the auction. In fact, most auctions have both private value and common value components, including all examples I have given you here today. In the beginning of the 1980s, Paul Milgrom started to analyze auctions with common and private values. His research can help us, for example, to rank all standard auction formats in terms of their expected revenue. But it can also explain things that we observe in practice. For example, that sellers often share their private information with the bidders, like test drilling results and inspection protocols. The auction theory developed by Robert Wilson and Paul Milgrom has been instrumental when designing new and complex auction formats. The auction designs by Milgrom and Wilson have been implemented all over the world to sell, for example, radio spectrum, fishing quotas, airport landing slots, electricity, and emission allowances. But designing these types of auctions, it is very complex. Suppose that you would sell radio spectrum to teleoperators and consider this map of Sweden. Some bidders in this auction for radio spectrum may only be interested to buy licenses in the north of Sweden if they at the same time can be guaranteed to get licenses all the way down to the south. Other bidders, they aim for local or regional coverage. So in this sense, the different licenses, they complement each other, but they complement each other in different ways for different bidders. So how can you then design an auction that takes these complementarities into account? How can you facilitate bidding? How should you update prices, and how should you select the winners? The first successful auction format that at least attempted to answer most of these questions was an auction format called the simultaneous multiple round auction. It was designed by Milgram and Wilson in 1994, and it has since then been used all over the world to allocate, for example, radio spectrum. So, to summarize, thanks to the rich theory by Paul Milgram and Robert Wilson, trained analysts can today design new auction formats, and practitioners can choose more wisely among existing auction formats, to the benefit of the buyers, the sellers, the end users, the taxpayers, and the society as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy, for that excellent presentation. Now it's time for questions from you, ladies and gentlemen of the media. And please push the button on the microphone stand when you ask a question, and make sure you see a red light on it. And I hope we have one of our laureates with us on a phone line. Dr. Wilson, are you there? Very good. This is Göran Hansson again, who called you to give you the good news about an hour ago. And we are now in the middle of the press conference, and I wonder if you're ready to take some questions.
Yes.
So, who would like to start? Please.
Good morning, this is Jens B. Nordström from TV4 in Sweden. Congratulations, Mr. Wilson. How are your feelings when you just received the news?
Well, it's very happy news. We're very glad about it. Very early in the morning here.
Have you had time to process anything about what you're going to do with the prize and how you're going to celebrate?
Well, no, not at all. Haven't thought about it.
I'm also wondering, one of the big questions in our society at the moment is environmental issues. Would you say, it seems that your theories would be very applicable to this problem in the world. Could you explain perhaps a little bit of how that might be able to be used?
Well, there are many problems connected with, so did you state your question? Is here. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'll try to repeat the question. One of the big issues of the day is that environmental issues and how governments of the world are supposed to attack this. And it seems that your research is applicable in some ways to that. Could you perhaps explain a little bit of how that might be used?
Yeah, okay. Well, so if you can take examples, there are a number of, take an area like there's the environmental leaders who have more and more sources, solar, and they have to have very market structures provided by auctions, both the system operate, both variability of the supply and demand. So the auctions of electric, for example, are very much influenced by the theory of auctions and state of auction designs.
Very good, thank you. We seem to have some slight technical problems with the line, but let's see if there are any more questions here. Yes, please.
Good morning, Professor Wilson, and congratulations. I'm Carl-Johan von Seth from the Swedish daily Dagens Nyheter. Can you tell us what was the last thing you bought on an auction? And the greatest or the most important problem you ever solved with an auction? Thank you.
The last thing I bought at an auction, I think myself have never actively participated in an auction personally, and there's some things that are implicit, by having auctions all around. But if you look at a advertisement from a search engine, that advertisement was usually sold at auction. So it's something that you encounter a lot, but I'm not myself much of a participant at all. My wife points out to me that we bought ski boots on eBay. I guess that was an auction. Okay, the best work, certainly the work on auctions has been very influential. I've worked in several other fields that I'm proud of that work too. And I, with my company, David Krebs, worked on the design of extensions of game theory to what we call a sequential equilibrium, and we think of that as important. And with my colleague, Srihari Govindan, I work on the basic axioms characterizing the selection of equilibria in games that satisfy very stringent requirements for rationality. So I work in each of these fields and some others, but certainly the one that's had the most influence, the widest influence, is the work of auctions.
Thank you. Yes, we have one more question over here. You'll get a microphone in a second.
Good morning. David Keaton from the Associated Press. Congratulations, Professor. Now, we learned that lots of what you discovered was in the early 1990s. This was before the internet revolution, per se. How has the internet changed the nature of auctions globally?
Well, very profoundly, because with the internet, there's auctions are constantly run on a continuous basis by various enterprises. I mean, we certainly see this in the ad auctions run by the major search engines like Google. But you see it also in public auction formats like eBay. There are, I'm trying to think of some of the others, but if you just take the effect of the internet on financial markets is very profound, because we now have many venues for financial trading, and they're all tightly integrated through digital communications over the internet. So we have essentially instantaneous trading in financial markets. So I think you can find pervasive the effects of the internet is sort of everywhere in our lives, and auctions have been part of that.
Great, thank you. One last question, please.
Jens Nordström from TV4 Sweden again. Professor Wilson, one of the big questions is that this prize comes with a sizable chunk of money. You've already bought the ski boots. What are you going to use the money for?
Amidst the pandemic, there's not much I could use it for. In terms of, I don't know, travel or something, but probably I'll just save it for my wife, my children. I guess we used to have a phrase that you put it in a stock. So just save it and wait for another time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Thank you particularly for being with us in the middle of the night, California time. Thank you, and congratulations again, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye. Now, if there are any questions for the panel, yes, please, David Keaton.
Yes, David Keaton again. We've noticed this year that all prizes have had American winners. Would you care to explain this, how this came to be?
Okay, I can start and then I'll ask Peter to join in. Since you're asking about all the prizes, if we take a grand historical perspective, before the Second World War, most prizes went to European countries like Great Britain, Germany and France. After the Second World War, there's been an enormous investment in research and higher education in the United States, and that has paid off in all the sciences. I'd say, at least if you look, perhaps not so much in economic sciences, but in the natural sciences, you see a significant proportion of non-American Nobel laureates nowadays. You can look at the last few years in physics, chemistry, for instance. You also have an increasing proportion from East Asia, particularly Japan, although there was none this year. So yes, there are many from the United States, but it's not homogeneous, and we'll see how the trend may change in the future, if there is a gradual shift again or not. Peter?
Yes, I mean, it's true that the laureates tend to be from the US, but we have a very careful process to avoid any kind of bias. In particular, we invite nominations broadly all from across the world. And then we ask experts to write up reports on these nominations, and then the committee sort of applies its judgment as well. So we have a careful process in order to ensure that we're not biased in any way.
Any other questions? Yes, please. Yes.
I'm wondering, if you look back at the last couple of years, there have been several winners who have specialized in contractual theory. Is this so important? I'm sure there are some other parts of the economic sciences who might be feeling left out here.
Let's start with Peter, and then we'll give Tommy a chance to comment as well.
Well, you know, we try to give the best prizes, and sometimes they come together in a sense. So that's how we work.
Yeah. So first of all, I don't agree that this is a prize in contract theory. What I do agree is that both auction theory and contract theory use game theory as a way to analyze different interactions. But this prize is more broadly. Now I had a 6-minute presentation, so let me just give you a brief historical outlook so you can see how broad this prize is. So it started off in the beginning of the 1960s when William Vickery could use game theoretical tools provided by John Nash, both of them Nobel Prize winners, by the way. After that, we have fundamental innovations in both game theory and auction theory. In the end, I mean, this sparked interest in other directions like experimental economics, behavioral economics, empirical economics and statistical estimations. Nowadays, people like Paul Milgrom work with computer scientists and psychologists. So I mean, this is a prize which is like this broad, probably one of the broadest prizes we have ever had. What you're saying is that, yes, there is some theory on this prize, as there was when Holmström and Hart got their prize a few years ago, but this is not a prize about contract theory.
Are there more questions? If not, I think it's time to conclude this press conference. Individual interviews will take place in various rooms and corners of the building, and our staff will help you find your way to your particular interviewee. Please remember to be careful and keep the distance when you exit the room. And with that, we conclude the press conference. Thank you.